You're listening to Let's Get It On with Big John McCarthy and Sean Wheelock.
Big John McCarthy has witnessed the best that the UFC had to offer.
That is it! Game, set, match! We have a new champion!
Your backstage pass to the world of mixed martial arts and combat sports. Only on the Ignotainment Media Network.
Let's get it on!
Hey everyone, welcome to Let's Get It On with Big John McCarthy and me, Sean Wheelock. Every week on this podcast, John and I give you an inside look at MMA and combat sports, always separating fact from fiction. On this week's program, we'll discuss Johnny Hendricks failing to fight Tyron Woodley in the co-main event of last Saturday's UFC 192 in Houston due to complications from his weight cut for that bout. Big John and I will also examine the judging in UFC 192's main event, Daniel Cormier versus Alexander Gustafsson, which resulted in 3 differing scorecards and a split decision win for Cormier. And we'll look at the just-named opponent for Fedor Emelianenko in his return to MMA, 28-year-old kickboxer Jadip Singh, who has fought just once previously in mixed martial arts. Plus, as we do on every episode of Let's Get It On, John will answer your questions. Submit them via email, info@letsgetitonpodcast.com, and on Twitter by using the hashtag AskBJM. Remember that you can download and subscribe to our podcast on the iTunes Store. For Android, download the Stitcher app and subscribe. And you can go straight to our website, letsgetitonpodcast.com. This past Saturday's UFC 192 in Houston saw its co-main event canceled when former UFC welterweight champion Johnny Hendricks pulled out of his scheduled bout versus Tyron Woodley the day prior due to complications from his weight cut. Hendricks' manager offered an explanation in a text that he sent to MMAJunkie.com, which read, quote, "Blockage in intestine and a kidney stone. Had to go to ER last night and doctor had to pull him and give him an IV." So, John, UFC 192 was, of course, the first ever event for the promotion in which the IV ban for rehydration was in full effect. And here we go. Is this the casualty of that, or do you think this is a casualty of just a tough weight cut, or is this both?
This has nothing to do with the IV, and that's what people need to understand. This happened long before the IV was in place. In fact, he was given an IV by the hospital because he was a dehydrated person who was in a position where that dehydration caused the kidney stone to, get to a place where it started to, give him a problem. He had an intestinal blockage, they're saying, which is unusual for dehydration, but can happen. And all of this stuff is the effects of a fighter trying to lose too much weight in a short period of time, and this has to change.
It's amazing, I think, the changes in our sport, even from 2009, 2010, these severe weight cuts. There were always fighters like Travis View who would walk into 250s and cut down to 205. Travis View definitely goes back, really a previous generation of fighters. But I think it's a fairly recent phenomenon where someone fights at 155 and they walk at 190, or you're hearing reports from the Hendricks camp that he started camp at 210 for a 170 cut. I just don't think anybody ever really thought that was possible. We don't see that in boxing. A boxing weight cut is 8 to 12 pounds. These are severe, severe weight cuts, 30, 40 plus pounds.
It's gotten to the point of being ridiculous. And this whole thing of fighters having it in their mind that they have got to be this big guy in a lighter weight class and that's going to make them better. That's the problem. It's a mindset that, it's been put into our sport. And, there's so many variables to this that people don't understand. And, the California State Athletic Commission has recently done a hydration study. Now, when you sit there and you say, how do you do a hydration study? There's a lot that goes into this, but there's actually, there's a machine that they use to measure the hydration of fighters. And what they do is they take and they measure the hydration of the fighter on the day of the weigh-in. They put them on this special scale. It's got electricity that runs through it. That fighter has to stand there with it. It's got computers all hooked up to it. It's a giant, conglomeration of stuff that I would never be able to understand. They have a guy named Rick Estrada that's running it that does a great job. And they're taking that and doing it on the day of the weigh-in with the fighter. And then they are doing it the day of the fight with the fighter. Now, it's not having any effect as far as whatever the person gains, they gain. but it's all about information. And they are finding out that these guys are absolutely losing incredible amounts of water, because this will actually say how much water is in their system comparative from one day to the next, because that's what we're talking about. We're talking basically about a 24-hour period. And the one thing that they have found, and because they've been doing this study for both MMA fights and boxing, and although boxing has weight cutting, they do not cut anywhere close to what these MMA fighters are cutting. They have come up with this and look and say, look, it is out of control with what MMA fighters are doing. Boxing fighters, they're losing weight and they're gaining weight back, but they are not doing it at half of what some of these MMA guys are doing. And this is what's going to hurt people. We have had fighters die. Okay, let's just put it out there and be honest. No one remembers, Leandro Souza, who is a Brazilian fighter, but Feijão was his nickname, and he was 26 years old, and he died from losing weight and losing too much fluid in his body to the point that his goddamn fucking organs shut down. And this is going to happen. We have lost fights in the UFC multiple times based upon weight cuts. We've lost championship fights. Look at TJ Dillashaw was supposed to fight, Heenan Bahal a second time up in Sacramento, and Heenan Bahal, slips and, knocks himself out, getting out of a tub from cutting weight, and is hurt, and they take him to the hospital. He's a dehydrated person. They immediately stick IVs in him. This is what happens. This is something that has to be addressed. We're always talking about the safety of the fighters, and with the safety of the fighters in mind, if we're not addressing the fact that when they're not in the ring, they're doing something that can be as detrimental, if not more, to their health and safety of what they're doing when they're actually in the ring. If we don't do something about it, then we're not being conscious about that health and safety of the fighters, which is supposedly what regulation is all about.
John, last week at the gym, I was speaking to a friend of mine who wrestled at the NCAA Division I level, and he made a really great point on weight cuts. He said, when you're wrestling at the college level, you have a season. So your weight is there, and you're pretty much parked at that weight for the season. You're going to gain weight, and you're going to go back to a different weight in the off season. But during that collegiate season, you're parked there. Whereas if you look in MMA, so these guys are typically fighting 2, 3, or 4 times a year. So it's that yo-yo effect. So let's just take the hypothetical welterweight, top-level welterweight. Starts camp at 205 pounds. So they're losing. They get down to 170 or probably 170.8 for the weigh-in. Now they're rehydrating, so when they're fighting about 26 to 28 hours later, their weight is probably in the low 190s or high 180s. And then they end the fight, and then their weight goes back up. It might even go above 210, above 215, only to go back through that cycle again. That, to me, seems like that's going to be even more dangerous than if you're a college wrestler and you're parking at 25 pounds below your weight, but you're maintaining that for a number of months. It's the up and down cycle that I think would have to have. I'm just speculating because I don't know enough medically. A lot of doctors listen to this program, and we want to hear from you, but I'm speculating. But I would have to think, John, that up and down cannot be good long-term for your body.
Long term, it's freaking horrible. And this is what Johnny Hendricks went through. And I feel bad for Johnny. I really do. But what he went through, that kidney stone, first off, everyone should experience a kidney stone once in their life, because you'll understand it's something that it starts to bend you over. It's almost like getting kicked to the liver. As far as when the pain gets to a certain point, you're just standing there going, man, I want to kill somebody right now. And there's nothing you can do. And it gets to that point. All of a sudden it relaxes, and all of a sudden you think, okay, I'm going to be okay. And then boom, it's back, and it just continues on. And, I've heard, people say, women say it's like having a baby. And so, it's payback for guys, because if you get a kidney stone, you kind of know what it's like to have a baby. It's just a very small one, and it's going in the wrong place. But look at, this is serious health considerations for the rest of your life, because what's happening is you're dehydrating yourself to the point that your kidneys are sucking all of the fluid out of them to try to get fluid into your body, and they're drying out, and it becomes this calcification that's inside it, and that creates the stones. And these stones don't just go away. they either stay within that kidney and start to obstruct its ability to do its natural function, or it becomes a stone that starts to leave, and then you have kidney stone problems for the rest of your life. Your kidneys, you got two of them. Okay, we're lucky that way. But man, when you start to have kidney failure, you have problems with your life that, man, you don't want. I mean, this is a bad thing, and this is what fighters are putting themselves towards based upon weight cuts. And we've got to do things, whatever it is as a sport, we've got to do things to start to look at this and say, hey, all right, what is going to benefit? Obviously, people are going to cut weight no matter what. It's going to happen. But right now in MMA, we have weight classes where, you go 125, 135. Now they even put in 115. So we got a 115 pound weight class, always for the women, but we just put one in for the men. Okay, fine. So 115, 125, 135, 145, 155. We have a nice 10-pound gap, between all the weights. And I think boxing, I'm going to say it straight out. I think they have 17 weight classes. It's way too much. All right. When you're sitting there saying, oh, we have a fight at, 147 pounds and we have one at, 154 and then 154 to 160, and we're talking 6 pounds difference in the weight classes, it gets a little bit much with what we have. But that
Agreed.
10 pound, okay, it's pretty reasonable. But as soon as we get above 155, we now have that where Johnny Hendricks lives in a 170 pound weight class, a 15-pound jump between the 55 to the 170 with the lightweight to welterweight. And welterweight to middleweight, again, another 15-pound jump. And then from middleweight to light heavyweight, we're talking about a 20-pound jump. And so maybe it's time that we need to start bringing in a couple of more weight classes. And we're bringing in the weight classes because we need guys to have the ability to get to a 10-pound jump in between those weight classes throughout. I'm not saying that's the greatest idea, but it's one idea that at least you have a place for a Johnny Hendricks to say, okay, I can go to 175. That's a 5 pound. 5 pounds is a big difference. And if he goes to 175 and fights at 175, great. But the real problem is nothing's ever going to change what the person's going to be trying to do behind the scenes in losing that weight and trying to get to a weight class that is just too low for them. We need to start, instituting things the same as the NC2A does with wrestling, be it Division I, Division II, doesn't matter. They do a hydrostat test on these guys to say, look, here is your base minimum. You cannot go below this weight class based upon your physical. They do the physical, they do a hydrostat test, they come up with the hydration of that person's body, and they say, this is the lowest weight you can go. We need to start doing that with professional fighters in MMA.
When I was the commentator for Bellator, the main card fighters, we would do their interviews 2 days out. So if we're fighting on Friday, the weigh-ins are on Thursday, usually at 5 local time, wherever we are, whatever time zone, it's 5 in that time zone. We're doing the fighter interviews the Wednesday morning for the main card guys. Routinely, we would hear, yeah, I'm right where I need to be. I still have to cut 16 pounds. I still have to cut 18 pounds. So It reinforces this isn't a gradual weight cut where you come in 28 pounds over your target weight and you're losing 2 or 3 pounds a week through camp. You're showing up 2 days before your fight and you have to cut double digit in pounds. I've heard guys say I've got to cut 20, 22 pounds. And this isn't a 48-hour weight cut. Now, you're talking about maybe a 30-hour weight cut because of the day before weigh-ins. That just has to be just havoc on your body.
It's horrible for your body, and that's the whole, it's just in a nutshell. Guys are literally, and girls are literally killing themselves to get to a specific weight. And it's become commonplace. And it's something that, as the athletic commission, we're allowing them to do it at any level that they want. And this just cannot continue on. It has to change. It has to change for the safety of these fighters. We can't allow them to, whatever they want, go and lose that much weight. Just can't do it, and it is exactly what, your friend was talking about. There is a difference. Fighters are doing this throughout the year, let's say 3 to 4 times a year, where wrestling was, yeah, you brought yourself down to this specific weight and you try to maintain it as much as you can throughout wrestling season. You're trying to keep that weight within a realm. So when your, wrestling match is coming up, I have to weigh in on this date and I'm real close. So I'm going to be losing 5 to 6 pounds to get to that weight. I can do that. It's not that hard on me. It's completely different what MMA fighters are doing.
John, you hit on hydrostat test, and there are a lot of theories out there, a lot of ideas floating around. How do we eliminate this problem, or at least reduce? For instance, in North Carolina, they have day of weigh-ins. So we did a Bellator in North Carolina, completely gaming the system. The weigh-in started 1 minute past midnight, completely gaming the system. Instead of 5 o'clock local time, they started at 12:01 a.m. I've heard theories of, well, make the fighters reweigh, but promoters will be against that because fighters, if they have to reweigh and you say you can only gain X percentage back, a lot of fights are going to be canceled. There's always a commerce element, like it or not, along with the safety elements. And I know a lot of mat-based sports, like in judo, for instance, I believe, even at the highest levels, World Championships, Olympics, you weigh in right at the mat with your gi. But if you're trying to get people to weigh in a couple of hours before a fight and it's on pay-per-view or worldwide television, promoters are going to be against that for obvious reasons. There are going to be loads and loads of these Hendricks versus Woodley fights. The entire fight card is going to be devastated.
It is, and it's a problem for promoters, and I totally understand the promoter side when you're saying, look, I don't want to have a system where my fighter weighs in, they make the weight, and then the next day, because they are too much over what is a percentage or a given amount that the athletic commission is saying this person can weigh in, that now my fight is lost. And I've, put hard-earned money out to not only bring these fighters to this location along with their trainers. I put them up in hotels. I have people that have bought tickets to watch these guys, and now you're not going to let them fight. That's a problem for the promoter, and I totally understand it. The promoter is looking at it. Look, this is a business for them. They have to make money to continue to do what they're doing. They have to make money so the fighters can do what they love to do and continue to fight. So there's a nice balance between all of this, but the balance has got to be put in a position that we're looking at the safety of these fighters as human beings, comparative to just a person that's putting a butt in the seat and is willing to go out there and fight. We can't let them do things that we know are functionally destroying their lives. And it is. You sit there and, what you do as a young man, I tell people this all the time, look at, if I was as smart, back when I was a young man as I am now, and I'm not saying I'm real smart, but if I knew the things that I knew, man, I wouldn't have done the stupid things to my body that I said, it's okay, doesn't matter. I am paying for them now, and we all look and think that, oh, dude, when I'm, 50 is, that's old. Trust me, it gets there pretty goddamn fast. And when you're there, you want to go to the next level. You don't want it to end. But you pay for all the stuff you did in the past, and these fighters are going to be paying for what they're doing. We're going to get a lot of guys that end up with, they end up with kidney failure, and they end up on dialysis machines and these types of things. And this is stuff that is all, to a certain extent, it's preventable. Not everything is preventable, but a lot of this is going to be preventable. It's no different than, what we do with now concussion studies. Look at the NFL, and you can sit there and, say what you want, but what the NFL has done in the last, let's say 10 years when it comes to concussions over what they did for decades before is incredible. Now they did it, and they did it in a way that there was resistance. There was resistance by the NFL. They tried to absolutely say that, experts in the field that were saying there was a problem, they're wrong. This is bull. No, this has not been proven. They'd bring doctors up that would sit there, and because they were getting paid, they lie. And, you look and you go, they went through this whole thing of trying to stop this entire thing about concussions in the NFL, and, oh, it's not a problem. They tried to stop it for a long time and finally realized this is not going to stop. We've got a problem, and we need to start to fix it. And it's not perfect, but it's way better for players now. I'm watching, guys that are phenomenal football players going off of the field and not being allowed back on, when before they would have been back out there. They're not being allowed to go back on. They're being taken care of in a different way. Well, that's what we need to do with the fighters.
John, as a final point on this, I think a lot of the pressure of these weight cuts comes from fighters who they hear it from their trainers, their managers, their teammates in the gym. Dude, if you went down a weight class, you'd be wrecking shop. You'd be killing these guys. 55, you're good. You'd be crushing these guys at 45. It doesn't always work that way. When you drop down a weight class, it's not just about what you gain, it's about what you lose. Because guess what? If you go from 55 to 45, those guys are a lot faster. If you go from 45 to 35, those guys are a lot faster. Sometimes you can really radically change your body. I don't think he'll mind me saying this. He's retired now. Good friend of mine, Brent Weidman, who I got to know really well in Bellator, one of my all-time favorite guys in the sport. He was a decent-sized 170, felt the pressure because he wasn't winning the 170 tournaments in Bellator, coming close, dropped to 155. He just wasn't Brent Weidman at 155. He looked sucked in. He had no explosiveness. He had no power. And he really wasn't any faster. And he recognized his mistake, and he went back up to 170 and finished his career. But I think there's that mindset in the gym, oh, man, if you only drop down a weight class, you're going to be a world champion.
Oh, absolutely. And, dude, it's said all the time. And you have to be, for trainers have to be reasonable about what they're looking at with their fighters. And, and I'll tell guys all the time, I'll get a guy that comes into the gym and, he's 5'7" and he's, 185 pounds. And I go, dude, and I'm the first one to tell him, you can't be a 185 pound fighter. You just don't have the frame for him, and because look at when we're talking about 185 pound fighters and, nowadays they're all 6'1", 6'2", 6'3", 6'4". They have anywhere between a 75 to a fucking 79-inch reach. And I get a guy walking in that's 5'7" with a 69-inch reach. It's like, you don't want to fight against these people. You're going to have to lose weight. But he has weight to lose. But it's not that I want him to lose it in a fashion of, oh, you just cut this weight in 1 week and get yourself down to 145. You need to start losing some body fat. You need to start, recontouring your body and making sure that, you put on good muscle weight and you take off some of that fat weight. And yes, your frame is the frame of a 145-pound fighter. And you've got to do that as a trainer, but you've got to be realistic in what you're telling people to go to, because, you can't just sit there and think that because someone is going to go to a lighter weight class, it's going to make them a better fighter. It's not. And again, I've had this conversation with a lot of top pro fighters that I've told them, dude, you need to go up in weight. And I'm not telling them to go up in weight because they're wrecking guys in the weight class they're in. They're having a little bit of problems, but you can see that their problems are they're just not performing to their actual ability based upon weight cuts. They've lost so much weight to get to a specific weight that their performance is inhibited. It's like putting a governor on a freaking race car. NASCAR takes and puts governors on race cars as far as, the amount of fuel that's going to be allowed to be, pushed into the engine. So it's going to limit how much output that engine can do. Take the governor off, it's going to go much faster, much better, much freer. And this is what guys are doing. They need to understand, sometimes it's better to fight the bigger guy. Sometimes the bigger guy is a little bit slower. He's not as fast, and speed is the one thing that I tell people all the time is so important in fighting. Strength is a good thing to have. It is. It's good to be strong, but strength goes away as soon as the fight really starts. And you get into the fourth minute, the fifth minute of the fight, the strength starts to equalize out. Speed is the thing that keeps you from being hit. It's the thing that gets you in on someone. It's the thing that's going to alter the ability for you to change where that fight's going to be. That's what you want. And to sit there and think that I'm going to be better and faster at a lighter weight is just not good thinking, because lighter guys are usually faster.
While UFC 192 did lose its co-main event, the card's main event did, of course, occur as scheduled, claiming Fight of the Night honors, as well as a decent amount of controversy, as Daniel Cormier successfully defended his light heavyweight title with a split decision win over Alexander Gustafsson. The three judges' scores, 48-47 Cormier, 48-47 Gustafsson, and 49-46 Cormier. John, you and I both know all too well, high-profile fights such as this, there's always going to be discussion, not just in split decisions, but when there are three different scorecards turned in by the three judges.
Yeah, but as basic as we can put it, let's talk about this fight. This was a good fight, and it was a difficult fight to judge when it came to basically 2 rounds were very difficult, very difficult. The first round, if you watch that fight, it's Dan Cormier's. He wins the round. He's just more active. He lands the better shots. Gustafsson doesn't land as good as shots. It's Dan Cormier's round. The second round is a close round. But if you're watching it closely, Cormier doesn't land as frequently as Gustafsson. Gustafsson lands that jab repeatedly. Cormier gets in a couple of good situations. But overall, even though it's a close round, Gustafsson should have won the round. Now you get into the third and fourth, and we got problems. The fifth round is Cormier's. Gustafsson doesn't throw enough. He's just not active enough because he's tired. He's taken a lot of shots. He's tired when it comes to his output, so he keeps on waiting, and sometimes he waits so often he's not doing anything offensively. So it's Cormier's. So now you get down to this fight really is it's a microcosm of 2 rounds. The third round, which is incredibly difficult to score based upon certain events that occurred, and the fourth round, which is incredibly difficult to score because it's that close. And so we got judges that went a little bit different on it. That's normal. You're going to have this. And in a way, we say controversial. It's not controversial. It was a great fight. And the right guy won. Although there are people out there that think that Alexander Gustafsson won, just like they did when he fought John Jones. That's because they wanted him to win.
Right.
And everything that he did, they gave more credit to, and everything that Cormier did was not quite as good as it really was. And you can't watch fights that way. You've got to go off of, I don't give a shit who wins this fight. I give a shit that the right guy gets the score that they deserve if I'm the one that's judging it. And the third round is the one that gave people a lot of problems based upon Gustafsson is actually getting beat in the round. Cormier is doing the better work. And one of the things that people don't pick up on is he hurt Gus twice in that round. He hurt him when he got him into the position with he was getting what we call a single collar tie, for wrestling with that one arm and bringing that other hand up with an uppercut. And he switched it, back and forth. But normally he was doing a left-handed collar tie and using his right hand for uppercuts. And you can see Alexander get hurt. You can see his body stiffen. You see him having a problem because he actually starts to stall. He stalls in his defense of what's occurring because his brain's getting freaking rocked. Then he ends up getting hit with a shot that I don't know if it broke his nose. I don't know if it was just the way that it hit him. But, when you get hit in the nose, sometimes you see a guy blinking in a way because he has a hard time seeing. And his nose is not working well as far as breathing. And you can see that happen to Gus. And I tell people all the time, look, fighters are going to talk to the judges. Their actions speak volumes. They're not verbally talking. But when you see a fighter do this, this is what it means. When you see him do this, this is what it means. And Alexander was talking to the judges as far as that. Then it got to the point near the end of that round, he hits Cormier with a beautiful knee, and it hurts Cormier. And Cormier actually starts to stumble as he goes across. Alexander throws another punch, and he goes down, but he comes right back up out of it, gets into a single leg, gets himself up. Not a whole lot more damage occurs, for the rest of that period of the round that was, still there. But Alexander absolutely hurt Dan, and it was visible. He actually put him on his butt. So now we have a fight in a round that we got so much going on that it's easy for a judge to looking at the end of it say, I think that Alexander's shot, the knee that hurt Dan, was the biggest factor in that round. And I think that had the chance to actually end this fight more than anything else that occurred. And I'm going to put more weight towards that than anything else. You can have a judge that looks and says, look, I've got Dan Cormier hurting Alexander twice in this round. I've got Alexander hurting Dan once big in this round, but it wasn't enough to make up for everything that occurred throughout the entire complexity of that 5-minute round and being hurt himself. It got it close, but it's not enough. And that's understandable when it comes to judging. We have different people that sit in those seats. They're all going to look at things just a little bit differently.
And John, that's the key point, because judges can dissent, and it doesn't mean that anybody's right, and it doesn't mean that anybody's wrong. Clearly, there are some awful scorecards out there, and I hate to admit it, but actually I don't hate to admit it because it's true. I'm happy to admit it. There's some awful judges out there. I didn't see any of that in this fight. It's just the reality. You have 3 human beings positioned at 3 different angles, and that's done by design. As I like to say, it's not blood sport where they're all sitting in a row on a stage. There's a reason why when we started combat sports in the 1800s, we started to move the judges so they would have separate and varying vantage points. That's just the evolution. So when you get 48-47 Cormier, 48-47 Gustafsson, and 49-46 Cormier, it doesn't mean anybody is wrong. It's just differing opinions.
That's exactly it. It's not that somebody's wrong. It's that they're all sitting at different positions within, that cage. Now people look and say, oh, how do you not see everything? Trust me, you don't see everything because you have the fighters changing their angles and you can't change with it. It's not like when you're watching on TV. When the fighters change their angles, sometimes you have them where you have, they're almost in a straight line with you as far as you've got one fighter's back and you can hardly see the other fighter based upon the positioning they have. Now there's people going to say, but they have that screen that the UFC puts. Look at the only time they're going to use that screen is when they can't see the fighters, or it's in a position, we'll say on the ground away from them that, the position of them doesn't show what's going on. So they'll look down at the screen to get the idea of what's going on. But their job is to watch what's happening live in the cage. Sometimes you got John McCarthy or Herb Dean or Jason Herzog scooting along, and their butt is in the way of something that happens just when it happens at a point that you don't get to see it the same as the other 2 judges saw it. So now you have a different opinion of that little encounter, that little action. You don't score while other guys are giving it, maybe some really good credit for what occurred. So it really, when you look at the 3 judges, I think we had Sal D'Amato as one of the judges. He's a phenomenal judge.
Excellent.
We have Derek, he went 48-47 for Cormier. We have Derek Cleary from Georgia who went 48-47 for Gustafsson. And Derek Cleary, people sit there and, he's a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He is a phenomenal judge, and he cares about judging, man. This guy, he calls me all the time. What did you think about this? Sal calls me all the time. What did you think about this? Did you watch this round? Did you watch this round? And we talk about it because they care that much about it. Kerry Hatley was the 3rd judge on the fight. Kerry is normally a referee in Texas. Kerry has been doing MMA for the last 15 years. Kerry is phenomenal as far as understanding fighting. He's the one that went 49-46 for Cormier, and I can understand exactly how he got to that score because I'm going to tell you when I judged it, I had it 49-46 for Cormier.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned the 3 judges because they're all, we know all 3. All 3 are outstanding. And again, to me, this is almost, I don't know if this analogy quite works, but if somebody reviews a movie who's a top reviewer and says 4 stars, and then another top reviewer says, I give it 3.5, it comes down to opinion. They're not saying it's a 1-star review. They're just looking at a couple of different things that maybe appeal or don't appeal to them. And I think that's what we had here because, again, all 3 are excellent. And I think all 3 are very valid and defendable scorecards. And isn't that really the key? Can you validate and defend your scorecard as a judge?
Absolutely. And, I can tell you, I talked to Derek right out. The only one I didn't talk to after this, I didn't talk to Sal about his score, but I've talked to Kerry Hatley and I've talked with Derek Cleary extensively on it because right away he's basically, he used some of my, terminology that I'll teach with and stuff. And I was laughing and I said, don't try to use my shit on me, man. And, he was talking about the 3rd round and why he gave it to Gustafsson. And his whole thing was, he says, look, I saw Cormier hurt Alex. He goes, I'm looking at it. When he hurt Alex, it was like he hurt him with a small caliber because I use calibers when I talk about the difference. Boxing has only got those 2 weapons and, it's a hand on each side, and so they're fighting with 25 caliber, or we'll say 38 caliber weapons. When we get into MMA and we talk about the difference between a punch and an elbow and a kick and a knee, there is a difference about the weight factor. And so, I'll many times talk about, look at when you hit somebody with, your right hand, you may have a really good right hand. So you're hitting them with a 9mm. But when that guy hits you with a knee, that's a 45 caliber. It's got more weight, it has more impact, and it does more damage overall. And so that's exactly what Derek Cleary, he says, John, he goes, I saw Dan, hurt Alex. He says, I saw him stiffen. He goes, I knew he got hurt. He goes, but he got himself out of it. And I thought, all right, he got himself out of it. He goes, he got hit with a 9mm. He goes, and when he hit Cormier, he goes, that was a 45 caliber. He goes, it hurt him. He says, that knee came up. I saw him stiffen. He says, and then he hit him with a shot. He goes down. He goes, that was the most dramatic change in that round. That was what could have ended the fight of anything that occurred overall in my mind. That was the thing that I was looking at that made me say, I need to give this round to Alexander Gustafsson. And I can totally understand everything he's saying, because what he's saying is what I want a judge to say. He's not saying, well, I thought he landed the better shots. We'll get that crap from judges all the time. And that tells me you don't know what you're talking about. But when I get a judge that goes into specifics as far as why he gave that round, and it's reasonable and it's truthful, I don't have any problem with what that judge is saying.
Still to come on this week's episode of Let's Get It On, we'll discuss the decision to name kickboxer Jadeep Singh, who has fought just once previously in MMA, as Fedor Emelianenko's opponent for his comeback fight, and we'll have another MMA celebrity edition of Ask Big John. With John McCarthy, I'm Sean Wheelock, and you are listening to Let's Get It On. Hey, this is Sean Wheelock.
And this is Big John McCarthy.
If you're a fan of our show, then you're going to love the rest of the Ignotainment podcast lineup.
Like the Ocho Man behind the 8 Ball and the Whiskey Philosopher with Jeff Cooper.
You can find these great podcasts and more at ignotainment.com. Thanks again and enjoy the rest of the program.
Let's get it on!
When looking for new and exciting clothing concepts, look no further than Lambs to Lions. Lambs to Lions has great designs that incorporates the past from boxing with the new and exciting evolution of MMA. We all start out as lambs, but with time, training, and hard work, we can all become lions. Be part of the Lambs to Lions movement and check out all of their great designs. You can get your Lambs to Lions gear at the Las Vegas Fight Shop or go to lambstolionsbrand.com.
Now, back to Let's Get It On with your hosts, Big John McCarthy and Sean Wheelock.
We always ask you to submit your questions via email, info@letsgetitonpodcast.com, and on Twitter by using the hashtag AskBJM. This week here on Let's Get It On, it's the return of our MMA celebrity edition of Questions for Big John McCarthy.
Hey, Big John, this is Felice Herrig. I've actually gotten mixed feedback on this question. I just want to know, can you grab the cage with your toes?
Well, hi, Felice. And you know what? It's a question that we get a lot of referees get confused on this, because you can put your feet on the cage, and if you are in motion, as far as you're trying to turn yourself over, your opponents will say, and side control, and you decide you can get your feet towards the cage. And if you can get your feet towards the cage and they're in motion, you can actually hook your toes and push against the cage with your toes. In that fashion, it's legal. What you can't do anymore, and this was as of 2010, is you cannot grab a hold of the cage with your toes and hold a position. You can't hold yourself in one area, grabbing a hold and keeping your legs up high on the cage, because your toes are doing it. If your feet are flat against it, you can do it that way. But if your toes are what's keeping your feet in that position, then they're going to sit there and tell you, move your feet off the cage. But you can always have your feet pressed against it. You just can't sit there and hold the position, but you can move and grab a hold as you're doing it with your toes. That's legal.
John, as a follow-up to Felice's question, with the fingers, and I think a lot of referees, especially at the local level, get this wrong. You can put your fingers through the links. You just can't grasp. But some referees, they see the fingers anywhere near the links or even the palm of the glove on the links of the cage. Stop, stop, stop. Don't grab the fence.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's, and, you get, it's not only the referee, you get the corners. A guy's hand goes, he gets pushed towards the cage, right? Or he's got someone up against it, and his hand goes and his fingers go through the cage, but they're not grabbing hold of it. He's holding the fence. He's holding the fence. It's like, shut up. You know what? If you're going to tell me something, at least have some knowledge in what the frick you're telling me. It's not the fact that their fingers are through the cage. His fingers can be through the cage. It's what does he do with his fingers when he grabs a hold of the fence material to control his body position or his opponent's. That's when it becomes illegal. That's when we're going to do something about it. But, we'll get a lot of guys. We'll get guys that'll sit there and the fighters are apart, right? And the fighter goes against the cage and he's kind of off balance and he grabs the cage for balance and stuff. And the corner, he's grabbing the cage. Shut up. He's not controlling your fighter with that. Shut up. He's fine. So a lot of it is, it's a lack of knowledge of what the fighter can actually do. Their fingers can go through it just like you're saying. It's when they actually grab the material to control their body position or change a position based upon it. That's when it becomes illegal.
Hey, John, this is Joe Riggs. I want to ask you a question that I know the answer to, but do you? How many fights of mine do you think you've refereed?
Oh, my God, way too many.
Joe told me the answer. I was stunned.
You know the answer?
Yeah, you have a memory like mine, so I know you're going to be close. And this is a guy who had his AMI debut at 17 and his pro debut at 19.
And has fought only 60 fights. I would say I've done Joe a lot, and I can name off fights of his that I've done. Recently, I've done. He had his win, when he did the Bellator tournament. He had Mike Bronzales. I did a fight. It was weird. I think the last time I had him was when he fought Ben Saunders, and he actually had a neck problem where he had a stinger go down, and it basically shut off his left side of his body, right at the beginning of the fight. It was a weird situation, but I would say, I've done over 10 with Joe. I would say it's somewhere in the area of 12, 13, something like that. It's not the most that I've done. I've done more than that with other guys, but somewhere in that area.
Well, Joe told me, so you're very, very close, as I knew you would be, 14. So that made me think, have you refereed anybody more than 14 times? Maybe Tito Ortiz or maybe Randy Couture?
Tito Ortiz 20 times.
20 times, wow.
20 of Tito's fights I think I've done. Randy Couture would be somewhere around 16, 17. Matt Hughes would be somewhere around 16, 17. Chuck Liddell, somewhere around 16, 17. All of those would be way up there. Just a couple times with those guys. It's to remember every fight is tough. The funny ones is if you go on, you can go on the only real recorder of fights that there's a couple. I think Tapology's got stuff. SureDog has stuff. But if you can go on SureDog and look up a fight, a fighter's record, and you can go on there with Chuck Liddell or Tito Ortiz or Randy Couture, any of the ones I said, or even Joe Riggs, and a lot of them will have the referee that was the referee of the fight, but a lot of them will say NA, and I go, that was me. I'm a lot of NAs.
You're a lot of NAs.
Because I don't know why, and it's not like, well, that's not a hard fight for even people to remember. How do you have NA? But they do, but there's a lot of, there's a lot of misinformation on who actually did this fight, did that fight. It's something that needs to be done. We need to have a better record keeping because we need to have, some fact as far as officials. Who was the officials for that fight? Who was the judges for those fights? Who was the judges? What was their scores if it went to a decision? And who was the referee for it? That's all good information for athletic commissions and for other officials because we get a lot of officials out there who just absolutely fucking lie about what they've done, how many fights they've done, and it drives me nuts. You need to be honest about everything you do. And when we get officials saying, I've done, 15,000 fights, it's like, really? Let's break down this in math, okay? Let's see if this is even possible. No, it's not. You're a liar. Jesus Christ. Why can't you just be honest?
Hey, Big John. This is Carla Esparza, Cookie Monster. My question is, I know that we're allowed to foot stomp to the foot, but I was wondering if an opponent was against a cage or something, are we allowed to foot stomp on the hand?
Good question, Carla. Hope you're doing good. This is something that confuses a lot of people when it comes to the rule of stomping. To break it down for people as simple as I can, you are allowed to stomp a standing fighter. Right now, a grounded fighter starts when any part other than just the soles of the fighter's feet are on the ground. So if we have a hand on the ground, they are a grounded fighter, and you cannot stomp a grounded fighter. Now, when I say you can't stomp the grounded fighter, you can't stomp their hand because they're grounded, and you cannot stomp even their foot, which was legal before. You can now not stomp the foot because they're grounded. The only time that you can use a stomp in MMA competition under the unified rules is when we have a standing fighter, meaning the only real thing that you can stomp at any time is that fighter's foot. There's no way that you're going to stomp anything else on a fighter, from the standing position. So the only thing that you're allowed to stomp is the foot.
Our thanks to Felice Herrig, Joe Riggs, and Carla Esparza for submitting those great questions. Remember, email us your questions, info@letsgetitonpodcast.com. You can also submit them on Twitter by using the hashtag AskBJM. Well, 28-year-old Jaideep Singh has been named as Fedor Emelianenko's opponent for the former Pride Heavyweight Champion's comeback fight set for New Year's Eve in Japan. Singh is very accomplished in kickboxing, having amassed 40 wins in 51 pro bouts and having captured the 2009 K1 World Grand Prix and the 2011 Rise Heavyweight Tournament. But John, he's fought just once in MMA. That was June of 2013 in Super Fight League. It's unusual, as you and I both know, when virtually everyone agrees on something in MMA, and seemingly everybody agrees that Jaideep Singh is not a worthy opponent for Fedor Emelianenko.
Well, you know what? He's probably not. Let's just be honest. Yeah, and it's not that, this exact same scenario has happened before, and we're going to get a lot of people sitting here complaining that, they put, a nobody in against, Fedor. This is bullshit. He should be fighting in the UFC, all this stuff. And again, people need to understand this fight is happening in Japan. This fight is going to be, for the Japanese people. And Jaideep Singh, although he has a Indian name, he is basically Japanese as far as he grew up in Japan. His first language is Japanese. He is a star in Japan. They know him well, and so since they know him well, this is a good fight for them as far as a company. Ryzen is the name of the new company that Saki Kabara is the promoter for. This is a good fight because the Japanese people will be behind it. And who are they selling it to? They're selling it to the Japanese people. Fedor he's a god there. And Jaideep Singh is a guy who is very popular and known as a good fighter, in K1 and as a good kickboxer. And so the Japanese people believe in him. This is the type of fight that, you're going to see out of a Japanese organization.
Good athletic commissions, those under the unified rules in the ABC, will look at bouts. So, for instance, and this happens more at the local level than it does on the UFC, Bellator World Series of Fighting level. But you'll see a local show, and there'll be a 20-5 guy against the guy who's 3-1. And the state commissioner, the executive director, might kill that fight. That happens routinely. So it's interesting when you look at this. Fedor Emelianenko, 34-4 with the 1-no contest. So that's 39 pro MMA fights. As we said, Singh, just the 1 pro MMA fight. But he has 51 pro kickboxing bouts. So how do you weigh that? I'm not sure that, like our friend Andy Foster in California, or Bob Bennett in Nevada, or our buddy Mike Mazzulli at Mohegan Sun, the president of the ABC, would allow this fight. But again, they don't have to allow this because this is in Japan.
Oh, exactly. But, when you look at it, you compare it to things that have taken place. Here's the thing to look at. This is not Jaideep Singh going in, with one professional fight. Okay. He has got one MMA fight. How many MMA fights did James Toney have when he fought Randy Couture?
Yeah, 0. And he had, and I pulled this up last night, so I knew you were going to lead into this.
Okay.
He had 83 pro boxing matches coming into his pro MMA debut. Couture, this was his 29th pro MMA fight coming in. That was in the state of Massachusetts, 2010. And it's just, I guess, like this situation. They said, all right, Tony is a complete neophyte in MMA, but he's a former world champion, and look how experienced he is in another combat sport.
Okay, and Jagdeep Singh is a former K1 champion. He is a guy that has a ton of experience in kickboxing. He has very little experience in MMA. His only fight was in the Super Fight League, which was an Indian-based promotion. He won, I guess, through elbow strikes in that. I've never seen the fight, so I don't know, how it went. But, you look and you go, this is the same type of thing. It's just, would a athletic commission, allow this fight in the States? Well, they actually have. Okay, so you can't say no, they wouldn't. Would someone like a Bob Bennett allow it in Vegas? I can't say that he would. He would probably look and say no. Andy Foster might be a little bit different in California because Andy Foster fought. He fought, MMA. He fought in kickboxing, and he's good enough to say, you know what? Look at this person may not be a really qualified MMA fighter due to the record, but I look at their record, they are a professional fighter. They know what they're getting into. They know how to handle themselves. This person has over 50, kickboxing fights. That's telling me that this is a person that understands fighting. Yeah, I don't think that you're smart fighting that guy. And in my opinion, you're not going to come out with a victory in this against that guy in this realm of fighting. But I'll give you the opportunity. I could see Andy Foster doing that. He's done that with recently. He had Fernando Gonzalez fought Paul Daly. Now, they're both MMA fighters, but they both fought as kickboxers in that Glory show that was part of the Dynamite show for Bellator. But Fernando doesn't really have any kickboxing experience, where Paul Daly probably had about 20 fights of kickboxing experience. But Andy is saying, hey, this is a professional fighter. Fernando Gonzalez has a lot of MMA fights. Obviously, MMA, utilizes kickboxing. He understands how to kickbox. This is a professional fighter. If you want to go in this fight against this person, yeah, I'll allow it because I think that you can be competitive in it. And that's the whole thing. Is it going to be somewhat competitive? And, he was right. Fernando lost the decision against Paul, but, it was, a 1-round difference in the fight. And it was a decent fight between these guys. And so that's what you're looking for. What you're looking for as the athletic commission is you do not want someone to go into something where they're going to get hurt. They are in over their head in a fashion that they don't understand when, the fighting game. They don't understand what, they're dealing with here, and we're not going to allow this train wreck. It's going to be different in Japan. The way they look at the fight, it's all about what the crowd is going to get behind, what is entertaining to the crowd there, and what they can sell there. That's what's important.
I think as we look at the big picture, obviously a lot of people who aren't kickboxing fans or basically just follow North American MMA had no idea who Jagdeep Singh is. But as you look, who is out there? So take away all of the heavyweights under contract to the UFC, Bellator, and World Series of Fighting. And World Series of Fighting doesn't have a deep heavyweight roster, but their champion, Blagoy Ivanov, very good, actually beat Fedor Emelianenko in Sambo, which really solidified his reputation as
in
a
the World
combat
Championships.
Sport. Right, in the World Championships, semifinal round. It solidified Ivanov's reputation as a combat sports athlete. But eliminate all of those heavyweights. So who are you really left with who's not retired?
Well, you don't, when you sit there and you say, eliminate all those, you can't eliminate all the Bellator ones, let's be honest.
True.
They're open, because Bellator is open to working with them. So, the real question is this, would people care that Jagdeep Singh is fighting someone if it wasn't Fedor? No, they wouldn't care at all because it's Fedor, and you have so many people that have followed Fedor. It's amazing for a guy that's, fought here in the States 4 times. The following that Fedor has here is amazing. People believe in him. They believe in what he did when he was in Pride. They believe in him as a fighter. And so they want to see him fight the very best. Now, that's questionable as far as what you're asking there. They want to see him fight in the UFC is what they're looking for. They want to see him fight, Cain Velasquez, and they want to see him fight, these different people that are in the UFC, but he has fought some of them. Like he fought Antonio Silva and lost. He fought against Fabricio Verdum and lost. He's fought against Andrei Arlovski and won. There's guys that he's fought in there, but they want to see him fight against someone that they believe has a chance of beating him. That's what the American public wants. Even though they love him, they want him to have competition that they can say that was a real fight. He proved himself against a real fighter. And I think that they're looking at it saying, he fights Jagdeep Singh, he's not fighting a real fighter. Well, he's fighting a real fighter. He's just not fighting someone that you classify as competition to him in MMA, and that's okay. Don't watch the fight. But, people need to understand fights are put together for specific reasons. Sometimes it's all about the competition, and sometimes it's about what's going to sell. Sometimes it's about teaching someone a lesson. Randy Couture against James Toney, no matter what anyone wants to say, it was to sell tickets and it was to teach somebody a lesson. Okay, now Dana was nice about that. Let's be honest. The person he put him against was an older individual. So it was a person that was at the end of their career also. It wasn't a person that was going to take him down and just pound the shit out of him. It was a person that was going to take him down, pound him a little bit, and try to submit him. And so Dana was actually really nice to James Toney and saying, okay, you've bugged me long enough. I'm going to give you your opportunity. Here you go. Have fun. And, a lot of people got behind that fight. They wanted to see that fight because they wanted to see this boxer who had this attitude that he could beat anybody go in there and get snuffed, and he did. But this is on the other realm. If people wanted to see Jagdeep Singh get whooped, they'd be happy with this fight. But the fact is they don't know who he is, and they don't care. They care about Fedor, and they want to see Fedor fight someone that they believe is a real fighter.
I think an argument could be made that there are two fighters in MMA who are going to generate interest no matter who they fight. And I mean no matter who they fight. Fedor Emelianenko and Ronda Rousey. And this will be put to the test. It's a difficult time period. It's going to be shown on my former employer, Spike, on tape delay New Year's Eve. A lot of college football going on. The television numbers are not going to lie. Now, Nobuyuki Sakakibara, my former boss at Pride, the former Pride president, now running this new promotion, he's probably a lot more concerned on the tickets sold and the television viewership in Japan. But ultimately, in modern MMA, to be a major player, you have to have good worldwide coverage. So I think it'll be interesting to see how this performs television audience-wise on Spike. Again, a fighter not many people know of, and people who are learning about him are rolling their eyes on tape delay. What's clear to me, though, John, for Fedor Emelianenko, 39 years old, hasn't fought since June 2012. There is no going back from a loss. That is it. I'll pull out the old game, set, match on that one.
Oh, yeah. Look at, other than a nice payday, this doesn't do a lot for Fedor. It's not going to help him in any fashion if he wins the fight, no matter how he wins the fight. And it can only lead to bad things as far as if, Jagdeep Singh gives him problems, people are going to say, oh, look, he's washed up, he's bad. Oh, he can't fight anymore. Or if Jagdeep Singh, wins and knocks him out, we'll say, oh, my God, can you imagine the repercussions? He's done. And so there's not a lot of upside for Fedor Emelianenko other than making his employer happy.
If Fedor Emelianenko would have signed with the UFC, and there were rumors that he would have, I wonder, John, and it's just speculation on our part, who he would have had first, who Dana White would have deemed for Joe Silva to send out the contracts to. I don't think it's going to be a top 10 guy, but I think it's going to be one of their known heavyweights. I don't think it's going to be set up as a squash.
It's hard to say who it would have been. It's man, I don't know. I don't think it would have been a squash like you're saying. They would have tried to put him against someone that would have been a good fight as far as style wise for Fedor, and because they need to introduce him to people that don't know who he is. But I could have seen them putting him against a top 10 guy in the heavyweights. I could absolutely see them putting him against someone like a Frank Mir. I think that would have been the fight that they would have probably put, because they use Frank in those types of situations because everyone knows Frank. People that have been following the UFC, know who he is, ex-champion, all this stuff. And it was almost a fight that people at a time when Fedor was the champion in Pride, Frank, I believe, was a champion for a while in the UFC at the same time, people were talking about back then. So that's the fight that I think would have happened.
Somewhat lost in this Fedor Emelianenko versus Jagdeep Singh announcement is really the B story, which kind of plays as the A story also, or the co-A story, is that Nobuyuki Sakakibara has said, we're not just going to do one fight to mark my return to professional MMA, Japanese MMA, Saitama Super Arena on New Year's Eve. It's going to be 3 fighting events in a row. Not officially announced at Saitama, but that's what it's looking like. So the 29th, 30th, and 31st of this December. That's remarkable. That is really remarkable. I can't even think of a precedent for this.
It's crazy. You look at it, you go, you're going to do what? But, I've been told there's going to be 2 fighting events, actually. The fighting events, they're almost setting it up similar to what, I guess you want to say the, International Fight Week that the UFC does. Look at how big a production that is with, everything going on and having, a couple fights, in back-to-back on different nights. All the things that are going on as far as, fighters there and trade show type of things and all these different companies coming and doing stuff. I think that's what Japan is trying to have here. This is what Sakakibara is trying to do, is do something similar to that to start to draw the attention back towards the MMA world for the Japanese people. And it's not a bad idea. He's looking at doing a fight, on one day, having fighters and all of this, entertainment stuff and trade show type of things on the day in between, and then doing the big show with Fedor the next day. Hey, if you're going to try to get back, you got to get people's attention, and this is a way to get their attention.
So on December 29th, this has been announced. 46-year-old Kazushi Sakuraba, clearly a legend, one of my all-time favorite fighters, but 46. He's lost 6 of his last 8 bouts. Spent a significant portion of his career at middleweight. He's fought as high as heavyweight. He's fought as low as welterweight, but mainly at middleweight. Against the one championship lightweight titleist Shinya Aoki. If this doesn't feel like a Japanese fight from 1999, I don't know what does. Maybe they'll both wear gis.
It's exactly what. Well, they're not. I could see Shinya possibly wearing a gi, but I doubt it. But Sakuraba definitely will not. But you look and you go, for the Japanese people and for Japan, I can see it. Look at, Pride was made off of the back of Sakuraba. That's the person that made Pride what it was. When they first started it, they tried to use Rickson Gracie, and he was the big thing with Takada. Takada being the guy that they were hoping was although he was a pro wrestler, maybe he is so good because we believe in him that he could possibly beat Rickson Gracie. It's like, are you nuts? But that's what they went with. Quickly realized, okay, that's not going to happen. And then tried to get Rickson back a couple of times, and Rickson was expensive, and they fall into this guy that is in the UFC that John McCarthy screws over in a fight, and then they bring him back for the next fight, and he wins it. And he ends up being the heavyweight tournament winner of UFC Japan. And they fall into this guy, and all of a sudden he's taking on the Gracies, and he's beating the Gracies. And he all of a sudden becomes, the Gracie killer. And he goes through, 4 different, Gracies. And based off of what he did, he was the guy that helped build Pride. And unfortunately they used him to the point where they tried to kill him. It seemed like at the end that they were, putting him in fights that you go, God dang it, man, that's not a good fight for him. And they put him in because it was, going to sell. And he ended up taking a lot of damage. He's at least been away from the sport for a long time. So as far as the damage and stuff, I think he's okay with that. I did see him at the Dynamite show. I talked to him a little bit. He looks good, but he's older and he's going to be slower. And he's going against a really talented, fast guy in Shinya Aoki. This is sometimes, as the hero, you're the hero for a long time, and then people will put you in a place to have someone else, take out the hero to become the one. And I think, in a way, this is almost what they're doing with Sakuraba.
I am definitely rooting for Sakakibara. I'm not saying I'm rooting for Sakuraba. I'm rooting for Nobuyuki Sakakibara, the former Pride FC president in charge of this new promotion. He had a very long non-compete when he sold out to the UFC in 2007. Now his non-compete is expired. He is back. My very good friend Jerry Millen, who hired me at Pride and brought me to M1, is involved. So I'm rooting for all of these guys. And I think maybe if they find success, John, what's going to happen is they have to be different. They have to do things that they're allowed to do in Japan that you just simply cannot do now in the year 2015 in North America or even a lot of European and South American countries. You can do these fights where a guy comes in and he's never fought anybody. You can pull, like when they brought in Rulon Gardner. You can bring in the Jadip Singhs of the world and not worry if they've fought in this type of discipline before, or you don't worry about weight classes. You can do a lot of interesting creative things because Sakakibara, as he did in Pride, without the restraints of a commission or the ABC, can be judge and jury. He can do whatever he wants, and it looks like he is doing whatever he wants.
Well, absolutely. There's no athletic commission there, per se in Japan for, them to say, no, you can't do it this way. No, you have to do it this way. It's a different mentality there. It's a different world there, obviously. And, he's going to do things the way he wants. From what I'm hearing, he's going to go back to basically the Pride rules. There's going to be a couple of changes, but he's going to go back to the Pride rules of the past because that's what worked for him and that's what he believes in. And okay, that's fine. I would rather see everyone doing MMA in the same realm, the same context, but look, it's a different country. What they believe in is going to be different than, what's, the North America believes in. And hey, he's got to do what he thinks is right to sell his show and to make it work.
Every week here on Let's Get It On, we bring you our poll question. You can cast your vote on our website, letsgetitonpodcast.com. This week's poll question: do you approve of Jadip Singh as the opponent for Fedor Emelianenko's comeback fight? Let us know what you think by voting yes or no on our website, letsgetitonpodcast.com. It's going to be interesting how it comes. I almost like to see votes coming in by what country you live in. I don't know if we have that technology or not at Ignotainment, but I'm guessing that maybe a lot of fans outside of North America would say, yeah, it's cool. And a lot of people who listen to our program, MMA fans in North America, would say, no, this is ridiculous.
Okay, there's one thing I'm going to complain about here on our show. We keep on having these poll questions, and then we don't know what the answer is. I want to know what the answer is to this.
We will do that. Yeah, and you can check it out. Let's get it on podcast.com. And John, you bring up a great point. We'll start revealing how people vote. And
there we go.
I check on it. It's funny. Nothing has ever pitched the shutout. There have been some things that I thought, of course it's going to go 100%. We always get a dissenting voice, and I think that's what's great about MMA is that people have dissenting opinions. Like we were talking about in split decisions and differing judges' scorecards. Just because you're a dissenting voice doesn't mean you're an incorrect voice. But do let us know what you think on this matchup. I'm guessing that the Japanese public, what we've talked about with Singh being so well known in combat sports and kickboxing, Fedor Emelianenko, in my experience, I've called 5 of his fights in my career. He's bigger in Japan than he is in the U.S., Canada, or even his home nation of Russia. I think this is a major fight. I mean, to me, this is, I don't want to get carried away and say this is Ali Frazier at Madison Square Garden in 1970, but with the return of Nobuyuki Sakakibara, I think they're selling out Saitama. I think this is going to do an amazingly large television number in Japan.
Oh, honestly, look at this is going to be huge in Japan. And look at this is what people need to understand is what we want to see here in North America is great, but it's not what's going to sell in Japan. And so you've got to go with what is, if you're Sakakibara, I got to go with what's going to sell in Japan. I got to go with what I can market, what I can build up, what I can get people to buy into. And that's what I'm going to do. That's what's going to make me successful. And that's what makes him a smart businessman.
John, 2007 doesn't really seem that long ago. But then when I think about when I was the commentator for 2007, I only had 1 kid at the time. I now have 2 kids. And my girl Ellie, who's 10 years old, was only 2. And I think about where I was in my life. But then I think about how different MMA was when I was there at the end for Pride, 2006, 2007. This sport, it seems like about every 4 years, it moves like maybe every 20 years for something like soccer or the NFL or baseball. It goes so quickly. And again, I am rooting for this promotion. I'm rooting for Jerry Millen and Sakakibara. But I just wonder if you can recapture that proverbial lightning in a bottle just because the sport is so different now than it was.
Well, that's the real question, and you're right, is are they going to be able to catch that lightning in a bottle? And it is different. And MMA is evolving. I tell people all the time, it's evolving really fast. You need to be up on these things because it's so new that the evolutions happen much faster than they do in other sports. And the real question is, with Saki Kabara he is trying to capture that lightning in a bottle. Is it going to happen? No one knows. And all you can do is wish him the best. And if it happens, awesome. But the real difference is, you look at the Pride, that occurred, there was usually about 6 to 7 a year. And to compare now and compete now in this world, let's look at, the UFC is doing 45 shows a year at least. Bellator was doing 20 some. I think they cut it down to about 18 or so this year, but they're talking about ramping it up. They're going to be doing 26, I believe, next year. So they're at 26 shows. You can't be doing these 6 to 8 shows. It's going to have to ramp up because that's part of the evolution of MMA. Is we've evolved as far as how many shows we're doing and how often people are expecting this, and how that it's hard to keep that if you end up doing really well, but your next show is not for a month and a half to 2 months. It's hard to keep that fire going under people to where they hold on to it for that length of time. You can't just come back and hit them again 2 weeks later, 1 week later, and get them pumped up on it again. It's a different world, and you got to market to it in the way that things are happening now.
John, final point on this. If you look at who MMA fans are, even hardcore fans, people listening to our show, outstanding hardcore fans like us, they watch everything, but they have come into the sport since Pride went away in 2007 because this sport continues to grow, continues to add people all the time. I wonder, especially from a North American and a European perspective rather than the Asian perspective, if they'll watch these shows coming up at Saitama at the end of December, and they'll think, this is really cool because this is so different from what I'm used to seeing in the UFC and Bellator and in my local promotion, or I don't like this because this is so different.
You know what? I can't tell you. It's gonna be one of the two. The one thing that we know off of what was done with Pride is Pride's production, what they did as far as the audience and the grandeur of the buildup between the fights was incredible, and it was better than anyone has ever done. They were the best, and I'm sure you're going to see something close to what was done in the past, now done again with the new promotion. So people are going to buy into that, I believe, because it's very much like the world of professional wrestling. And if there's one thing the WWE does incredibly well is their production and the way they bring about their stars and stuff. It's outstanding, and Pride was phenomenal at it. So I'm sure that this promotion is going to be incredible as far as the production value of what they do. The real question is, people are used to what they've been seeing with the UFC. They're used to what they've been seeing in Bellator. Are they going to buy into what they're going to see as a different outlook on MMA and how to present it with this new Ryzen promotion?
We are back with you next week for an all-new episode of Let's Get It On, first available on Friday. Download and subscribe to our podcast on the iTunes Store. For Android, download the Stitcher app and subscribe. And you can go straight to our website, letsgetitonpodcast.com. You can also find us on social media, facebook.com/letsgetitonpodcast, and on Twitter, @PodcastMMA for this show, and for us personally, @JohnMcCarthyMMA and @SeanWheelock. To ask us a question, make a comment, or inquire about becoming a sponsor of Let's Get It On, email us at info@letsgetitonpodcast.com. Again, that's info@letsgetitonpodcast.com. We are gaining listeners every week, every episode in the U.S., Canada, and around the world. Please help us continue to spread the word about Let's Get It On. This is your show as much as it is ours. For Big John McCarthy, producer Chris Lakin, and our entire crew, I'm Sean Wheelock. Thanks for listening, everyone. This has been a presentation of Ignotainment Media Network, online at ignotainment.com.
Let's Get It On with Big John McCarthy and Sean Wheelock, only on the Ignotainment Media Network. Don't forget to leave a rating and review in the comments section of the iTunes podcast store. If you have questions, comments, or are interested in sponsoring the show, contact us at info@letsgetitonpodcast.com or check out our additional lineup of podcasts, including Ocho Man, Behind the Eight Ball, The Whiskey Philosopher, and Youth Baseball Talk at ignotainment.com.